He is the architect of Apple's universe. He's the man who encouraged Steve Jobs to turn everything white. He has overseen all elements of every Apple device sold in billions, which makes him one of the most influential figures on Earth. Yet he's also the most unremarkably remarkable person you could ever meet. You might think you'd recognize him on the street, but you probably wouldn't because he's just so normal. That's how John Alrich, business writer for Sunday Times, described Jony Ive. This is the video I wanted to make for a while. It's not the biography of Jony, it's about who he really is, his creative thought process, what really matters to him, and how he worked with Steve Jobs. Let's go. In the early 90s, it seemed Jony achieved his dream. He was working for this crazy company in California called Apple. He became their head of industrial design, yet by the end of the 90s, he was thinking of quitting. Apple was dying, and Ive's sense of purpose was being stripped away from him. It all changed on September 16, 1997, when Steve Jobs returned as CEO of Apple. They met for the first time when Steve went over to their design studio. Jony was 30 years old and expected to be replaced. You've not been very effective, have you? Steve said, recognizing that studio actually had value. I clicked with Steve in a way that I had never before done with someone and never have since, Ive later recalled. During the visit, they started collaborating on what became the iMac, and soon Apple launched its Think Different campaign. His father, Michael Ive, was silversmith and taught design in high school in East London, and later for university students at Middlesex Polytechnic. Jony often followed his father around, presenting drawings for go-karts, tree houses, and other design ideas for him to review, and once a year, as a special treat, Jony was allowed to make anything he wanted at his father's workshop. As a teenager, Jony didn't fit in. He had a slight stutter that made him hesitate to speak and made him look shy. People wanted to bully him, so he played rugby to keep tormentors in check. In 1989, Jony earned £500 award after graduation and immediately spent it on a plane ticket to San Francisco, a place he heard was a design utopia. He was instantly wowed by the atmosphere of Silicon Valley, a polar opposite to conservative England. He wanted to come back there someday. In 1990, he developed ceramic bathroom designs while working at an agency in London, Tangerine, creating myriad prototypes and doing massive historical research. But finished products were too hard to produce, and he felt his efforts were a waste of time. Soon, though, he was commissioned to design portable computers for Apple, and that turned out to be an addition. And in 1992, when Jony was just 25, he was offered a job there. Working at Apple, Jony Ive spent more time with the legendary Apple co-founder Steve Jobs than anyone else. He has deep memories from working together. Steve always wanted products that didn't force changes in your behavior. His wife Laureen said that a feeling of gratitude that someone else thought this through in a way that makes your life easier is something he was always looking for, and he didn't find it until he worked with Jony. Back in 1997, Jobs immediately saw that Jony could take something as nerdy as a boxy desktop PC and turn it into a carefree, cool symbol, all in one design, like he did with the first iMac. For each product, Steve and Jony would discuss corners for hours and hours.
One of the things that Steve would say, because I think he was concerned that I wasn't, he would say, how many things have you said no to? And I would, honestly, I would have these sacrificial things, because I wanted to be very honest about it, and so I say, oh, I said no to this, and no to that. And But he knew that I wasn't vaguely interested in doing those things anyway. So there was no real sacrifice. What focus means is saying no to something that you, with every bone in your body, you think is a phenomenal idea, and you wake up thinking about it, but you say no to it because you're focusing on something else.
Jony has a similar insane attention to detail as Jobs, and soon began to oversee operations and production. He traveled to Apple factories in Taiwan, China, South Korea, and Singapore, sometimes sleeping on the line to ensure the precision he brought to one-off product samples had been captured in the final product.
And I think particularly as a designer, I think it's very often in the very small, quiet things, like worrying about how you package a cable.
Mm-hmm. You clearly worry about that a lot. Yeah.
I worry about that ever such a lot.
It shows.
And Steve worried about that a lot as well. And I think it's that sort of, that preoccupation You know, when you're sat there on a Sunday afternoon worrying about the power cable that's packaged as a ziggy-zag thing, and you're going to take that little wire tie off, when you're sat there on a Sunday afternoon worrying about this isn't really very good, the only reason, I think you're very aware that the reason you are there is because I think our species deserves better. It deserves some thought. And it's a lovely way of, I don't know, I think you feel connected.
Right.
Jony believes that you can't just design an abstract and then tell somebody else to make it. Like fashion designers whose work you love, they are there for every step. He stayed for months in places where Apple made products.
I obsess trying to deeply understand the general nature of ideas. Understanding their nature, I tend to have more ideas and do a better job caring for, protecting, and developing them. Ideas, by definition, are always fragile. If they were resolved, they wouldn't be ideas. They would be products that were ready to ship. I've come to learn that you have to make an extraordinary effort not to focus on the problems which are implicated with any new idea. These problems are known, they're quantifiable and understood. But you have to focus on the actual idea, which is partial, tentative, and unproven. If you don't actively suspend your disbelief, if you don't believe there is a solution to the problems, of course you will lose faith in your idea. That is why criticism and focusing on the problems can be so damaging, particularly in the absence of a constructive idea. Remember, opinions are not ideas. Opinions are not as important as ideas. Opinions are just opinions.
Jony starts a project by imagining what a new kind of product should it be and what it should do. Only once he's answered those questions, he works out what it should look like. He's extraordinarily curious, digging advice in unusual places, like working with the confectionery manufacturers to perfect the translucent jelly bean shades of his first big hit, the original iMac, or traveling to Niigata in northern Japan to see how metal workers there beat metal thin to help create the titanium PowerBook, the first lightweight aluminum laptop in a world of plastic computers. He spent months and months working on the exact shape of the stand of the desktop iMac because, as he put it, it's very hard to design something that you almost do not see because it just seems so obvious, natural, and inevitable. When he finished a product, even one as fresh and iconic as the white headphones that came with the first iPod, he's haunted by the idea, could I have done it better? He's really self-conscious. Buying a Bentley was a tough decision for Jony. He didn't want people to perceive him that way, even though the only reason he wanted that two-door car was entirely down to its old-school square design. That's the big difference between him and Steve Jobs, who wouldn't bother whether people liked him or not.
We'd been working on this, we'd put our heart and soul into this. I was saying, couldn't we be a little bit more, could we not moderate the things we said? Little bit. And he said, well, why? And I said, well, because I care about the team and, I care about... And he said this brutally, brilliantly insightful thing, which he said was, no, Jony, you're just really vain. Oh. And he said, no, you just want people to like you. And I'm surprised at you because I thought you really held the work up as the most important, not how you believed that you were perceived by other people. And I was terribly cross because I knew he was right.
After Steve's death and Cook's appointment as CEO, Ive pushed for projects he thought would take the company into the future, wearable technology including Apple Watch and AirPods. By 2017, Jony was Apple's chief design officer when his ultimate project was unveiled, Apple Park, the company's new headquarters in Cupertino. He felt this was enough and announced to his small design team that he is leaving. I've made the entire video why Jony left. You could watch it in the description of this video or just by clicking on the top right corner here. Most of the time, Jony Ive had a terrible life balance, endlessly seeking perfection and created thousands of prototypes that later became products we all know and love. So what drove him? What was his true motivation?
I would really like to read an email that Steve wrote to himself one Thursday night, 13 years ago. To Steve Jobs, from Steve Jobs. I grow little of the food I eat, and of the little I do grow, I did not breed or perfect the seeds. I do not make any of my own clothing. I speak a language I did not invent or refine. I did not discover the mathematics I use. I am protected by freedoms and laws I did not conceive of, legislate, nor do I enforce or adjudicate. I am moved by music I did not create myself. When I needed medical attention, I was helpless to help myself survive. I did not invent the transistor, the microprocessor, object-oriented programming, or actually most of the technology I work with. I love and admire my species, living and dead, and I am totally dependent upon them for my life and well-being. Now, every time I read that email, and honestly I read it a lot, its truth, its humility slows time. And it quietens some of the noise, and it puts my trivial preoccupations in their place. And I find myself, instead of staring at my feet, it helps me raise my head with a renewed resolve as I'm reminded of my true motivation. That email leaves me feeling only grateful.
After Apple, Jony started a company called Love From, which as he described is a gentle gathering of designers to do what they do best, serve humanity, and do that beyond technology. And before I show you one of the most profound secrets from Jony for every creator out here, I just want to say thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Consider adding a sub, liking, commenting, all of that good stuff, and I will see you in the next one.
One of the wonderful consequences of being open is that you find yourself actually listening. To listen well means you need to be quiet. Great ideas can come from the quietest voice. And I really worry how many good ideas I have missed because I wasn't listening, or I couldn't hear a thing for the usual deluge of opinion. I think it would be great to resist the urge to fill every moment of every minute with opinions and to listen.